the Atlanta Falcons, who have had a bit of a busier day, even if they didn't bring in any big names. They took some volume shots in terms of bringing in a couple familiar faces as weapons. Austin Hooper's back on a cheap contract. Alameda Zaccheaus, UVA legend, started his career in Atlanta and is back. He got a cheap deal. I don't remember the exact terms of that contract.
The Zaccheaus deal isn't out there yet. It
Okay,
hasn't been
cool.
reported what it is.
And then Jahan Dotson comes in. Commanders legend, Jahan Dotson. 2-year deal. $8 million-ish a year. Something like that. So, they already have their wide receiver one. They try to build some depth behind it. I don't know. We'll start there. How do y'all feel about that depth that they've kind of amassed in terms of pass-catching weapons behind Drake London?
Well, I can tell you from a Falcons fan perspective what some of these reactions were today for the Zaccheaus and Jahan Dotson grouping.
Yeah.
The words they used were Zaccheaus and Dotson not bad. And so that's a, not really an optimistic look, as in it's not terrible, but they would not go as far as say it was good. Now the Zaccheaus and Austin Hooper, I thought it was funny. Those are both former Matt Ryan weapons. Matt Ryan is now acting as a kind of in the football operations role for Atlanta, and he signs 2 of his former players and his former teammates and weapons.
Someone's like,
I thought that was funny.
Do you think he reached out to Julio Jones?
I have. I would be surprised.
Yeah, definitely not.
But they needed something. Now, I don't think either of these 2 players move the needle whatsoever. Jack can kind of talk more so to what Jahan Dotson was this past year, or not this past year, but in his Commanders tenure. But for the team, they need some help there. Like Tua needs weapons around him. He's never been a guy who's had a 1 year or just a one weapon to go to, and he's worked there.
Yeah.
Worked with that. Like he's needed Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane. Now, he's technically, you could argue he's got something like that in Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan. That's pretty solid. So now you just need kind of supporting cast around them. I don't know how much Tua moves the needle. We can get into that conversation in a second, but they were 19th in passing yards per game, 25th in passer rating, and 28th in completion percentage last year as a team. And that's across Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. You add those 2 together. Now, I, funny enough, heard this argument from a Falcons fan where I brought up completion percentage being a problem. And they said, well, Caleb Williams didn't complete any passes. And so I went to go look just to double check. And the Bears were a full-on outlier. The bottom 5 teams in completion percentage last year were the Falcons, the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, and the Bears. So the Bears were a full outlier there, and Tua needs to improve on that. That's not, that's common sense. You complete more passes, you're usually a better offense and a better team. I'm fine with these 2 weapons. I think, Jack, you can speak more so to Jahan Dotson than I can, but these don't move me whatsoever.
They're definitely not needle movers, and they come in the wake of them releasing Darnell Mooney, and they don't feel like neither of them feel like upgrades to Darnell Mooney, even though Darnell Mooney had a down year in 2025. If you want to read the stats you have there, Sanders.
Yeah, he had nearly 1,000 yards receiving in 2024, which I remember vividly because I ended up trading him for, I think, Derek Carr in fantasy football because I needed a quarterback. So I traded Mooney for Derek Carr. Derek Carr, JP, did he get hurt in 2024?
Yeah.
Yeah, got hurt. Darnell Mooney goes off for 1,000 receiving yards, and I look like a fool in that fantasy league. But then this last year,
hurt and Rattler replaced him.
Yeah, got hurt this year. And then Mooney had a down year this year, having only 443 receiving yards. It does clear up nearly $7.5 million in cap space. But like I agree with Jack. Like I just don't think that Dotson and Zaccheaus are upgrades over Mooney. I feel like it's more of just, maybe picking your poison, or
they're
you
trying
think
to recreate in the aggregate, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You try to save the money that you get by releasing Mooney. and then spend less money to get a couple guys who together you hope can replace that production or get back to that production you saw in 2024.
The problem is they didn't do that though.
Yes.
They saved 7.5 on Darnell Mooney and then spent 7.5 on Jahad Dotson. 2 years, $15 million, 7.5 per.
Maybe they're hoping
And
he
then we
like
don't know what Zaccheaus is, but I would assume Zaccheaus is of a similar ballpark, maybe $5 million
He's
around
probably-
the cheapest it could be.
he's probably a little cheaper. Yeah, maybe they're hoping Jahan Dotson still has a little upside in him. In terms of Dotson, real quick, Dotson. I mix first and last name. Dotson. I think he's a fine receiver as like a wide receiver 3 or 4. It's hard for me as a Commanders fan to like detach the fact that we drafted him in the first round to like what he became as a player because he is clearly nowhere near a first round quality wide receiver. But he's okay, and same for Zaccheaus. Like you're maybe like a fine wide receiver 4. So maybe they're like, okay, now we can get a wide receiver 2 in the draft. Maybe in the, I don't know exactly what their pick. Do they have a second round pick?
The Falcons do have a second
Okay.
round pick. They'll pick just a few picks before the Packers' first pick, the second round pick.
Cool. So maybe they're
so
like,
that's the earliest pick.
maybe like we're going early, fairly early wide receiver in this draft, and that hopefully is going to be our wide receiver 2, and the room looks
Yeah.
a little better.
They will be one of 32 teams to draft either Omar Cooper Jr.
Correct.
or Elijah
Correct.
Surratt because all
Uh,
32 teams are
may-
taking one of those two.
So maybe that's
Maybe,
their
but
play, but we won't know.
they have 6 wide receivers on the roster
Well,
now
there
that
you
they've
go.
signed Dotson and Zaccheaus. And so I don't think that's the play. Now, the 3 other receivers that aren't Dotson, Zaccheaus, London are no slight to them, no names who did not play a ton of snaps last year.
Yeah.
So those are very quickly easy to cut, including one of them was a 6th-round pick 2 years ago for him. So they very well, if they like a receiver there, they could go there. But I don't know if that's necessarily like the plan right now. I don't think you sign 2 receivers planning on drafting, one receiver in the draft. I think you would assign just one of these receivers and spent that money and then save the other one for the wide receiver because where they're drafting, if I'm not mistaken, it's either 48 or 49. There's so many receivers in this draft. They're going to find somebody there
Sure.
that can give them serviceable snaps next year. It's not like it's going to be there's a chance everybody's gone at that point. That would be pretty shocking
Yeah.
if that's what occurs on night 2 on our live stream.
Well, we can get a Falcons fan call in if it does potentially. I don't want to like sit on the Falcons too much, and we are about to talk about the fact they brought in Tua.
Are
That-
bringing in
Are
Tua.
bringing in Tua, correct?
Which that's the crazy
And-
thing is any of these deals technically could fall through.
Could fall
but
through, but the odds they do. I mean,
Correct.
the hit rate on guys like Schefter are pretty good. Deals don't typically fall through, and if it is, it becomes a noteworthy story as is. Thinking this, my point kind of parlays into that conversation of like, the offense wasn't fantastic last year. Put up a lot of duds despite having high end weapons. They struggled with QB play. They struggled with some consistency from kind of the second tier weapons. Guys like Darnell Mooney didn't have a great year. Ray McLeod didn't have a great year. And it kind of felt like the biggest thing they needed to address because their defense, while pretty young last year, actually was pretty good. Now they are losing James Pierce. But now they've gone through at least the start of this free agency and they're bringing in Tua. And it's like, do we really think, / should they really think that's going to like actually take their offense up a level?
yes,
Because I don't. I mean, we just talked about how kind of we're underwhelmed by these wide receiver signings. I know we've talked a lot about Tua on this podcast. I know kind of collectively our opinions on Tua. I don't think it's a horrible deal. He's so cheap. Like
Right.
you're bringing him in on the minimum. So it's not a horrible swing, but it's also by no means like a proven, like, oh, yeah, this like is for sure going to help them get better. It's a, hey, we can have a hope.
Yeah, I think that they're doing it because we've seen that in a perfect situation, Tua Tagovailoa is a like
But that was
top.
pre-advanced E. CTE.
Correct, and I agree with that. But I guess they're willing to take the risk on the minimum, right? Like no one is going out there and giving him $30 million a year to come in and play quarterback.
Yeah.
They're willing to risk the minimum. Because there's not a whole lot of other quarterback options out there. Malik Willis ends up going to the Dolphins. Your other options are Kyler Murray, but I believe where is he expected to go? The Vikings now.
Possibly.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of great options out there. And so I don't
Could have
hate
brought Marcus back, man.
I don't hate the decision. You think that you have a better offensive line and a better offensive situation than the Dolphins had last year. And so you bring in the guy who, when he has been at his best and healthy, has been a top 10 production quarterback. You can argue about the production versus whether or not he's a top 10 quarterback, but he's produced like a top 10 quarterback, especially that 2023 season, which
But that's multiple years removed.
that was
and
2 years ago.
injuries removed.
Multiple injuries. But I think it's a risk that they're willing to take, and clearly he believes that he can recover, right? I mean, he's still playing football, so obviously he thinks he has something left in the tank. And so I think that's a risk they're willing to take. And it seems like he is as well.
Thoughts on that move, JP?
It just makes me question what their direction is going forward. Are they looking to win the division next year? Are they looking to be competitive? Now, the risk argument in Tua, I don't think there is any risk in signing him to the contract that you did, because it's the league minimum. It literally will cost you nothing. He's already getting paid for. So from a money perspective, I don't think it costs you anything. I do think you're in grave danger if you roll this guy out there as your starting quarterback and say that, we're trying to compete with this guy, because he was 20 touchdowns, 15 picks last year. On top of the 15 picks, he had 8 fumbles. That's 23 turnovers. He averaged just 190 passing yards per game. The weapons are there, so there is kind of no excuse. But he's not a competitive quarterback, and so this is. I don't even think this is a good. This is a bridge quarterback.
That's what I was going to say. Is maybe they are just like, we signed him for the minimum, and he's just going to start till Michael Penix is back healthy.
The thing is, I hate that, because now you're wasting what will be if I'm not mistaken, either the second to last or the final year of Bijan's rookie contract.
Yes.
Regardless, you're a year closer to having to extend Drake London. You're a year closer to having to extend Bijan Robinson, and you haven't made the postseason. You haven't finished any better than 8-9 with those two elite weapons. You franchise tagged Kyle Pitts for what seems like no reason. Now I guess you're going to see if he works with Tua, and then you can potentially sign him to an extension. But now you're almost like guaranteed looking into next year's drafting a quarterback, unless there's still some belief in that building, and Michael Penix, who tore his ACL for what I think is a third time now in his career. So
yeah. Based on rumblings, it does not seem like they have tons of faith in him, partially because of what he's shown on the field, but mainly due to the injuries and the fact he's already kind of, he's not a young prospect anymore. He's 26, I believe, at this point. So yeah,
it'll be 26.
I think it's a good point. It kind of feels like maybe they're in their heads they're trying to take advantage of a weaker division and just kind of staying pat. But I think we've kind of learned that if you try and stay pat in a weaker division, someone is going to go out there and make the moves to actually make them better, and then you end up getting left behind.